Little girl asked. Can you fix our door? Mommy's scared. The CEO next door showed up at midnight. The houses on this block lined up in quiet rows, all sharing the same cracked walkway that stretched out toward the main road. But there was a line, unmarked yet unmistakable, between one part of the street and the other. At the far end stood a home that always looked like it belonged in another neighborhood. Clean siding, a porch light that clicked on every evening at 6 sharp. The hedges were trimmed, the walkway swept, and the door never squeaked. That was Nathan Hale's house. He was 36, lived alone. No one really knew what he did, though they guessed it was something important, something that required silence and order. People in the neighborhood called him the man at the end. Always polite, never warm. Just a few houses down in a worn rental with chipped paint and a sagging porch, Claire Bennett lived with her 3-year-old daughter, Winnie. Their front door had given up being useful a long time ago. The wooden frame was warped from years of weather. The lock stuck more often than it worked. To close it, Claire had to pull hard with both hands in a grunt. One of the boards had already started to peel from the top, and the gap it left behind whistled when the wind passed through. Every night, the cold crept in, brushing against their legs as they sat near the living room heater. She had thought about getting it fixed many times, but rent came first, groceries next, and everything else. That had to wait. That morning, the rain had paused, but the wind was still biting. Claire tugged Winnie's hood up and buttoned the top of her coat as they stepped outside. Cold, huh? She said, adjusting her own scarf with one hand while holding Winnie's tiny fingers with the other. Winnie nodded, her boots making soft slaps on the wet pavement. They walked toward the edge of the block where the path opened up to the main road. Claire's mind buzzed. Last night's shift had run too long, and she hadn't slept much. The image of the door creaking through the wind kept returning. Up ahead, Nathan was locking his front door. Dressed neatly, hair perfectly in place. His movements were smooth, mechanical. Claire lowered her gaze slightly. Just another neighbor passing by. But Winnie let go of her hand and took 2 quick steps forward. She stopped a few feet from Nathan, tilted her head up, and said calmly, clearly, "Can you fix our door?" "Mommy's scared." Claire froze. Her breath caught in her throat as if the words had struck her in the chest. She rushed forward, scooping Winnie into her arms. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice uneven. "She just says things sometimes. I'm sorry if she bothered you." Nathan didn't move. Claire looked away, heart pounding. She had learned long ago people like him, people with safe homes and clean coats, they did not want to be part of messy lives like hers. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away faster than necessary. Winnie looked over her mother's shoulder, confused. She did not understand why the moment felt heavy. Nathan remained by his gate. He did not promise anything. He did not call out, but the little girl's words echoed louder than the wind. "Mommy scared." That night, the storm rolled back in. Wind pushed against the rooftops with growing force. Rain splattered windows like scattered gravel. Inside his home, Nathan sat by the window. The walls did not creak. The lights did not flicker. The silence inside was warm, wrapped in calm. But out of the corner of his eye, through the blurred shadows of the rain, he saw the light from Claire's front window flicker. The door, it was moving again, not wide, not open, but trembling, as if it could not decide whether to stay or give into the storm. He set down his book. For a moment, he did nothing. But the sound of that little voice returned. "Can you fix our door?" Nathan stood. He reached for his raincoat, pulled it on, then walked down the hallway and picked up a small, well-worn toolbox. He paused once at the door, then stepped into the night. The rain had not stopped completely. It fell in thin, steady sheets, swept sideways by wind that howled through the narrow alley between houses. The sky outside was a deep slate, lit only by brief flashes from distant lightning. Inside, Claire was gently rocking Winnie, humming low, trying to ease her into sleep. The little girl stirred but did not fuss. The wind outside pressed against the walls like a stranger wanting in. Then a knock, soft, not hurried, not aggressive, just enough to make its presence known. Claire froze, her heart briefly caught between fear and instinct. She laid Winnie down gently, tucked the blanket close, and moved toward the door. Through the small glass pane at the top, she saw a silhouette, tall still. She opened the door just a crack. Nathan stood there. His raincoat clung wet to one shoulder. In his hand was a small metal toolbox. No umbrella, no smile, just calm. "I came to take a look at the door," he said. "If now is not a good time, I can come back later." His voice was steady, neither familiar nor distant. Claire hesitated, then opened the door wider. "It's okay. Just thank you." Nathan stepped up under the porch awning, but didn't enter. He turned toward the door and studied it for a moment. "The hinge is off here," he said, pointing near the top. "I can fix it from outside." Claire stood to the side, arms crossed, not from cold, but from habit. She watched him carefully. He did not glance into the house. He did not ask questions. His eyes stayed on the door, the tools, the task. It was a small thing, but it settled something in her chest behind her. Winnie peeked through the edge of the curtain, at Nathan, at his dog. The dog, Buster, she remembered, sat obediently beside him, not barking, not restless, just there. Like this was nothing new. Nathan crouched near the lower hinge. For a moment, he paused. His eyes narrowed slightly. The splintered frame, the rusted latch, the chill that seeped in from the gap, it all reminded him too vividly of another night, another home. A woman standing by the door, holding her fear behind a tired smile. His mother. He blinked once, shook his head faintly, as if trying to release the memory, and said, "Do you mind shining a light here?" Claire nodded. She took out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and held it just above his shoulder. She angled it carefully so it lit the metal, but not his eyes. Rain started to fall harder. Without a word, Claire stepped away and returned with a worn old umbrella. She opened it gently and held it just enough to shelter him. One side of her sweater was soon soaked. Neither of them said anything. There was only the sound of wind, rain tapping against the porch, and the soft click of tools against metal. Nathan worked slowly, precisely, not rushed, as if he was repairing something far more delicate than just a door. When he finished tightening the screws, he removed his raincoat and rolled it up. He tucked it into the crack where the panel had warped, blocking the wind from slipping through again. He stood up. The door no longer rattled. Claire reached for it, pushed it gently. It moved cleanly, smoothly, and then settled. No creak, no shake. She let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her voice caught. "Thank you. No one's ever helped me with this kind of thing before." Nathan gave a slight shake of his head as he closed his toolbox. "Everyone deserves a door that closes right," he said. Matter of fact, like stating the time or weather. He reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the small shelf beside the door. A card, no title, no company, no number, just Nathan across the street. Then with a polite nod, he called softly, "Buster." The dog rose without a sound, following Nathan as he stepped down into the rain. Claire stood at the doorway, watching as they disappeared into the storm. She closed the door slowly behind her. It clicked into place. The rain continued outside, but inside something was quieter than before. Something had shifted. Not the wind, not the hinges, something deeper. After the night, Nathan fixed the door. Winnie talked about him every day. She called him Mr. Fix-It, like he was a character from one of her picture books. She told Claire how he stood in the rain, how he didn't look inside their house, how his dog just sat there quietly. Then one morning, she sat down with her crayons and drew a picture. A house with a glowing yellow light, a closed front door, and a dog resting peacefully on the porch. That afternoon, as Claire walked Winnie home from preschool, the little girl held the drawing tightly. As they approached Nathan's house, she spotted him standing on his front porch. "Mommy," she whispered, tugging at Claire's sleeve. "I want to give him this." Claire paused. She wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but then she gave a quiet nod. When he walked up and held out the drawing, Nathan knelt slightly, took the paper carefully, and looked at it for a long time. Then he gave a soft smile. "Thank you," he said. That was all. Claire stood nearby, watching in silence. She didn't say much as they walked away, but later that evening, Nathan pinned the drawing to the front of his refrigerator. It was the only thing in his home, not tied to work or function. It stayed there. On the way home, Claire began to feel uncertain. The moment had felt warm, but now doubts crept in. Had Winnie overstepped? Was Nathan just being polite? The next day, Claire took a different path home, one that didn't pass his house. And the day after that, she did the same. Winnie noticed. She stood at the window after school, crayons in her hand, and asked quietly, "Mommy, do you think Mr. Fix-It will be sad if I don't say hi anymore?" Claire didn't answer. A few days later, Nathan was out front watering his plants. He looked up and saw Claire at the far end of the row, mostly hidden by a few parked cars. He was about to look away until he noticed something. An older woman nearby had lost her balance and stumbled. Claire, though clearly in a hurry, set her grocery bag down and rushed over. She helped the woman sit on the curb, pulled tissues from her coat to clean a scrape on her hand, offered her water, and stayed until a family member arrived. When the woman was safe, Claire picked up her bag and continued walking, never once checking to see if anyone had noticed. But Nathan had. He stood frozen, still holding the garden hose, and thought of his mother, who had always stopped to help others, even when she had little herself. But when she had needed someone, no one had stopped for her. In that moment, he saw Claire. Clearly, not through hearsay or passing glances, but through action, and he understood. She didn't help others because she needed something in return. She helped because it was who she was. The next morning, Claire found a small box on her porch. Inside was a basic smart lock kit and a folded piece of paper that read, "Use it or don't. Just keep her safe." No name. But she knew. That night after working late, she came home to find a paper bag near her front steps. Inside was a warm sandwich and a bottle of milk. She stood for a long time before picking it up and quietly going inside. From that day on, every time she and Winnie came home after dark, the porch light was already on. No one ever mentioned it. Gradually, things began to change. Claire started nodding when she saw Nathan. A small gesture, no longer afraid, he nodded back. Buster walked beside him, as calm as ever. One afternoon, as he passed by their yard, Nathan paused. "Buster's getting old," he said gently. "He likes having someone to sit with him on the porch. If you two aren't busy, you're welcome to join us sometime." Claire looked down at Winnie, who was already smiling up at her. That evening, they sat outside. Claire on the steps, Winnie beside her, petting Buster like an old friend. Nathan sat across from them, not too close. He talked about the breeze, a squirrel that had climbed into his attic once, and the strange noises it made. It was small talk, but the kind that makes space for something more. When the sky turned darker, Claire stood and took Winnie inside. She closed the door gently, and for the first time in a long while, she realized she didn't feel the need to lock it immediately. The fear that used to settle in her chest each night was still there, but lighter. It had made room for something else, something small, something like trust. That afternoon, Claire and Winnie walked the familiar path to Nathan's house. A small bundle wrapped carefully in brown paper held gently in Claire's hands. Inside were simple homemade pastries, nothing extravagant, just something warm, soft, and made with care. Nathan opened the door, surprised to see them. His expression softened as Claire handed him the package. "I thought you might like these," she said. He smiled faintly, then paused. There was a brief flicker in his eyes, the kind that comes before someone says something they do not say often. "Today is my birthday," he said. The words came out almost unsure, as if they were unfamiliar to his own ears. Claire blinked. "Oh, we didn't know." Nathan nodded. "I figured still." He glanced at Winnie, who was already smiling at the sight of Buster lying near the living room rug. "If you're not busy," he said, "would you like to stay for dinner?" It was not a formal invitation. It was quiet, simple. Claire hesitated, but Winnie had already taken a step forward, tugging at her hand. Claire looked at her daughter, then at Nathan, and gave a small nod. Dinner began with small motions. Nathan opened his fridge, pulled out ingredients he hadn't really planned on using. Claire washed vegetables at the sink, sliced bread with slow, careful strokes. Winnie sat at the kitchen table, coloring in a notebook and talking to Buster, who seemed to understand every word. The warmth in the room did not come from the stove. It came from the quiet sounds of people moving around each other, filling a space that had long been too quiet. At some point, Nathan began to talk, not loudly, not with drama. He told them about his mother, about nights when the rain leaked in through broken windows, when their own door never quite locked, and when sleep never really came because he had to listen to every creak, every shuffle in the hallway just in case. He spoke slowly, like someone opening a box that had been sealed for years, unsure of what might still be inside. Claire listened without interrupting. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The way he told it, without anger or bitterness, said enough. Near the end of the meal, the silence shifted. Claire looked down at her empty plate, then began to speak. Her voice was lower, almost a whisper. She told him about being pregnant alone, about the day her family stopped answering her calls, about hospital rooms and long bus rides, about the night she gave birth and walked out the sliding doors to no one. Nathan didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "No one saw me off the day I left for college. I packed my bags and walked out the door alone." It was not a comparison. It was recognition, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes pain sits in places words do not always reach. Later, after dinner, Claire offered to help clean. She moved to the sink, sleeves pushed up, hands submerged in warm water. The sound of dishes clinking was the only thing between them. Winnie had fallen asleep on the sofa. Buster curled up beside her. Claire kept her eyes on the soapy plates. Her voice when it came was unguarded. "No one's ever stayed," she said. Not to help, not really. She was not complaining. It was just a truth. Nathan stood a step away, letting the silence settle before moving closer. He waited until she turned slightly, just enough to face him. Then, gently, he reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek with the back of his hand. His touch was light, not claiming anything. "Then tonight I'll stay," he said softly. "Just tonight if that's all right." Claire didn't respond with words, but she did not step back.